She wept for weeks. Alone in the family mausoleum, locked from the inside, the sounds she made during that interval, not the kind that anyone who heard them through the stone would choose to describe in detail. Afterward, what had been done to her body was irreversible. What she had been, the sharp, beautiful, calculating young woman who had walked into that tomb expecting to emerge with power, was gone. What was emerging instead, piece by piece and in ways she could not control or anticipate, was something she had no language for. When the tears ran out, she made a decision. She would not be destroyed by this. She would not allow the thing that had happened to her to be the thing that ended her. She had a purpose that predated the transformation, and a purpose that predated the transformation could survive it. Her name is Cassiopeia, and the story of how a girl raised for intrigue became a monster and chose to remain a weapon is the story of what happens when the one thing you never lost is the will to keep moving. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story told the way it deserves to be heard. The Couteau family occupied a specific position in Noxus, not the highest exactly, but the most useful kind. General Couteau was a celebrated soldier whose campaigns had extended the Empire's reach in directions the maps had not previously included. His name meant something. His family had resources. His daughters grew up understanding, because they were raised to understand it, that the world organized itself around power and that their job was to locate power and be near it. Katarina followed her father's path: combat, directness, the specific excellence of someone who moves through opposition by overwhelming it. Cassiopeia followed her mother's. Soreana du Couteau was not a soldier. She was something more intricate than a soldier. A woman who understood that empires were not shaped only by armies but by the quieter forces that moved through courts and councils and private conversations. She had been teaching Cassiopeia this since before the girl was old enough to name what she was learning: how power worked in the spaces between official channels, how information became influence, how the right word in the right ear at the right moment could accomplish what armies could not. When the family relocated to Erzeris on the Shurimian coast for the general's campaigns, Cassiopeia stayed close to her mother. The unfamiliar city and unfamiliar faces made the older women her primary reference point. It also made her Soreana's most constant student, and Soreana, removed from the constraints of the Noxian capital and its watchful eyes, began to teach more directly than she had before. Cassiopeia learned politics and diplomacy and the specific art of invisible influence. She also gradually began to understand that her mother's concerns extended beyond the official interests of the empire. Here is what Cassiopeia did not know until she was ready to know it. Her mother was a member of a secret faction that called itself, or was called by others, the Black Rose. An organization centuries old, working through Noxus's institutions from within, pursuing purposes that were not Noxus's purposes, but that used Noxus's power as their instrument. Soreana had been careful to keep this from her children. She had been even more careful after the assassination attempt. The poison on the hairbrush, the weeks of recovery, the household dismissed for security. The attempt on Soreana's life produced something her illness did not intend. Cassiopeia watched her mother nearly die. She watched the slow recovery, the weakness, the damage, the particular quality of a person who has come close to not existing and carries that proximity in how they move through rooms afterward. She was at the bedside for most of it. She was also, during all of it, thinking. When Soreana was well enough to tell her about the Black Rose, Cassiopeia had already identified the people responsible for the attempt. She had done this systematically and quietly, the way she did most things, by following what could be followed, by finding the connections that less attentive observation would have missed. She had not waited for permission. She had not waited for guidance. She eliminated them. The speed and precision of what she accomplished was, by Soreana's own account, startling. No trace, no attribution. A problem existed, and then it did not, and the absence was clean enough that no one who investigated the disappearances could locate the mechanism. Cassiopeia was, at the time, still technically a girl. She was also demonstrably exactly what the Black Rose valued. They accepted her. This was not the beginning of Cassiopeia's involvement in her mother's world that had been ongoing in the way that a child's involvement in their parents' work is always ongoing, whether they are formally acknowledged or not. It was the formalization of something that had already been happening. She began the expeditions. The family's resources funded them. Her analytical mind planned them. The ruins of Shurima held things, not just relics and artifacts, though there were those, but something more fundamental. The power that had organized the ancient empire, the divine force that had allowed it to project dominance across a continent for centuries, was not simply gone. It had become latent, inaccessible, but not absent. Cassiopeia wanted it. The Black Rose wanted it. The purposes were aligned, which meant the resources flowed. She hired a mercenary named Severe, a Shurimian fighter with the specific competence and the specific lack of organizational affiliation that made her useful for work that could not be officially attributed. They moved through the ruins together. Cassiopeia planned. Severe executed. The arrangements suited both of them, in the way that arrangements suit people when neither party is fully honest about their intentions. Then the political situation shifted dramatically. Jericho Swain overthrew Borum Darkwill. The Couteau family, including the general, aligned with the new order. Soreana, who had spent decades operating through the structures of the previous arrangement, found herself in a more precarious position than she had been in since the hairbrush. The Black Rose's members, all of them, were now exposed to a power transition that had not accounted for their interests. She sent Cassiopeia into the deep desert with a specific objective: find the divine power that had been the expedition's goal from the beginning, and return with it as a weapon that could be used in whatever conflict was coming. Return with it, or do not return. Cassiopeia swore the oath. She meant to keep it. She was always good at keeping the oaths she swore on her own terms. She found the tomb. An ascended warrior, one of Shurima's divine champions, someone who had been transformed by the sun disk in the ancient rituals that the current world had mostly stopped believing had ever really happened, lay in a burial chamber that had gone undisturbed for centuries. The power was there. She could feel it. She was at the threshold of everything the expeditions had been for, and there were witnesses. Cassiopeia had always understood that certain kinds of operations required certain kinds of conclusions. She had been applying this understanding since before she was formally a member of anything. The mercenaries who had helped her get here, the guide who had navigated the desert, the people whose eyes had seen what she was about to do, they were variables in an equation whose solution required their removal. Her first target was Severe. She struck. In the same moment, the immediate, unforgiving same moment, the ancient stone guardian that had been keeping watch over the tomb found the angle it had been waiting for. It moved with the specific velocity of something that has been still for a very long time and is no longer still. Its fangs found her. The magical venom moved through her body faster than she could understand what was happening, and she was unconscious before she could understand what the unconsciousness meant. And her mercenaries carried her out of the desert while the transformation that had begun inside her worked on what she was. The mausoleum was where she locked herself when she came back to Erzeris and understood what was happening. She could feel her body changing in ways she could not direct. She could feel the power, the ancient, terrible Shuriman divine magic that had come into her through the Guardian's venom, rather than through the ritual she had been seeking, organizing itself in forms she had not requested and could not yet comprehend. She could feel what she was losing. She cried for weeks. She stopped, not because she had resolved anything, The resolution was not available yet, perhaps never entirely would be. Not because she had found a way to accept what had happened as acceptable. It was not acceptable, it was the thing she had not wanted and could not undo. But because she had come to the limit of what grief could do, and was still here, and still here meant still capable of choosing what to do next. She had wanted ascension. She had not achieved ascension. What she had achieved was something else. The magical essence of Shurima's divine tradition in a form that was foreign to her body, and growing in ways she could not predict. Unpredictable, but potentially enormous. The venom had not only changed her, it had infected her with the ancient magic she had come looking for. She had found the power. It had found her differently than she had intended. The distinction was important, and not, in the end, final. She had purposes. She had training. She had a mother who had spent decades teaching her that the tools available to you were rarely the tools you had wanted, and that the people who succeeded were the ones who used what they had, rather than being consumed by the absence of what they had wanted. She emerged from the mausoleum changed in ways that would make certain aspects of her former life impossible. She also emerged with the specific coldness of someone who has processed what has happened and decided it will not stop them. The Black Rose still had work to do. Noxus was still being reorganized around a new center of power. Cassiopeia was still the person her mother had trained, still in possession of everything that training had produced, still carrying the purpose she had left Urzaris to fulfill. She did not know what she was becoming. She knew what she had always been. She intends to find out if they are compatible. If this story reached you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion, told the way it deserves to be heard.